Alright, welcome everybody. My name is Stephen Cooper, and I'm here to talk about a very serious problem that the world is facing. Now, the title of my presentation is called The Health Effects of Global Warming. But before I get into that, I'm going to provide you with some background information on global warming. So starting off with the first slide. So what exactly is global warming? We hear about it all the time, but what is it? Well, the term global warming is often used interchangeably with the term climate change, but the two terms have a distinct meaning. You see, global warming can occur from a variety of causes, both natural and human-induced. And global warming refers to the warming that can happen as a result of increased emissions of greenhouse gases from human activities. While the term climate change typically refers to changes in our weather patterns that have been identified since the beginning of the mid-19th century. And our planet's climate is always changing. In the past, it has changed due to natural causes, such as volcanic eruptions and changes in the Earth's orbit. But currently, the changes have sped up as a result of human behavior rather than natural forces. And the major mechanism behind climate change is the increased greenhouse effect. Alright, moving on to the next slide. How the Earth is warmed. Well, many of the chemical compounds found in the Earth's atmosphere act as greenhouse gases, which means they allow sunlight to freely enter into the atmosphere. Alright, looking at the figure. As the sun's energy hits the Earth, some of that energy is absorbed by the Earth's crust and by the oceans, which warm the planet. Now, the rest of the energy is radiated back towards space as infrared energy, or heat energy. And some of this infrared energy does radiate back into space. A portion is absorbed and re-emitted by water vapor and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. Now, this absorbed energy helps to warm the planet's surface and atmosphere just like a greenhouse. And this natural greenhouse effect helps to warm the Earth's surface by as much as 33 degrees Celsius. And without it, our planet would be too cold for humans to survive. Alright, moving on to the next slide. What's influencing climate? Well, it's important to know that the amount of heat energy added to the atmosphere by the greenhouse effect is controlled by the concentration of greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere. And all the major greenhouse gases have increased in concentration since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And as a result of these higher concentrations, scientists predict that the greenhouse effect will be enhanced and the Earth's climate will become warmer. And during the past century, humans have substantially added to the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels such as coal, natural gas, oil, and gasoline needed to power our cars, factories, utilities, and so on. And the added gases, primarily carbon dioxide and methane, are enhancing the natural greenhouse effect. So you're looking at a table of the main greenhouse gases. The first three shown are carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. And they're emitted to the atmosphere by both natural and anthropogenic or human-caused sources, while the last four occur only as a result of industrial processes. And also, human activity has the largest impact on the concentrations of carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. You see that column that says global warming potential? This is a measure of how much a given mass of greenhouse gas is estimated to contribute to global warming. Now, it's a relative scale which compares the gas in question to that of the same mass of carbon dioxide. The GWP of carbon dioxide is 1, which means that it's constant for all time periods, and the GWPs of other greenhouse gases are measured relative to it. And even though methane and nitrous oxide have much higher GWPs than that of carbon dioxide remains to be one of the most important greenhouse gases, contributing to well over half of the enhancement of the greenhouse effect. Alright, moving on to the next slide. So how does this all relate to me? Well, climate change poses several potential health threats to mankind. You see, higher temperatures are expected to increase the occurrences of heat-related illnesses such as heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And there's evidence of this happening already. For example, in the summer of 2003, an intense heat wave was blamed for an estimated 35,000 deaths across Europe. And one study says that global warming has doubled the likelihood of heat waves of this magnitude. And there's expected to be an increase in respiratory diseases. People with ailing hearts are more susceptible because the cardiovascular system has to work harder to cool the body. And increased pollen production can also aggravate chronic respiratory diseases like asthma. So moving on to the next slide, some more impacts on health. Well, there's expected to be an increase in extreme weather conditions. With hurricanes already, the number of Category 4 and 5 storms have greatly increased over the past 35 years, along with the ocean temperature. And as we know, hurricanes can seriously damage public health infrastructure, such as hospitals and clinics. And more heavy rainfall, because warmer temperatures increase the energy of the climatic system, and that can lead to heavier rainfalls in some areas, which can lead to flooding. And there's expected to be more droughts and greater evaporation, particularly during summer and fall, could exacerbate drought conditions and increase the risk of wildfires. And all these varied climate conditions can affect agriculture, and that has the potential to greatly influence the presence of famine and malnourishment in the land. Alright, moving on to the next slide. Some more impacts on health. Well, waterborne and foodborne diseases are expected to increase. You see, temperature and rainfall both affect the spread of water and foodborne diseases. And contaminated water supplies and poor sanitation will increase the incidence of diseases such as cholera. And vector-borne diseases, see, climate change may increase those diseases that appear in warm areas and are spread by mosquitoes and other insects, because a change in climate will be more favorable to the growth of vector organisms like mosquitoes and rodents. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change project that warmer climates will increase malaria-carrying mosquitoes and put 65% of the world's population at risk of malaria infection. Now, this is an increase of 20% from the 1990s. Alright, moving on to the next slide. Alright, now dealing with mental health, natural disasters can lead to loss of livelihood and loved ones, which can greatly affect mental health. And also, there's expected to be an increased risk of neurological diseases that come from exposure to neurotoxins in seafood. You see, neurotoxins are produced by harmful algal blooms, which are increasing due to climate change and can cause serious illness and death. Alright, moving on to the next slide. So what are governments doing? Well, here are a few things that governments are doing to try and curtail the effects of climate change. There's the Kyoto Protocol, which is an international agreement between several developed countries to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 5% from 1999 levels by 2012. But the United States is not one of these countries. And there's the Clean Air Act, which was enacted by Congress to control air pollution on a national level, and the EPA develops and enforces regulations. Alright, moving on to the next slide. Well, they're investing in renewable energy sources like wind and solar power, and these are less polluting sources of energy. And also, state governments have made improvements in how buildings are operated and maintained in order to improve energy efficiency. And another way is improving the efficiency of water and wastewater treatment centers, and they can reduce the amount of energy needed to convey, treat, and distribute water. Alright, moving on to the next slide. So what can the public do? Well, there are two basic ways to deal with health problems of climate change. Number one is mitigation, and that means to reduce the causes of climate change and its consequences on human health. And we can do our part in reducing greenhouse gases by recycling, using public transportation more often, and turning off electrical appliances when not in use, and so on. And now, adaptation, that deals with improving the capacity to deal with health risks by being better prepared. It basically involves taking measures to reduce and prevent disease in the future. For example, we can rid sources of breeding sites of mosquitoes by encouraging people to fill in pools and puddles of stagnant water with sand, and by asking local government and authorities to provide a good draining system. Alright, moving on to the next slide. Alright, for more information on the health effects of climate change, you can visit any of these websites that are listed on the slide. Well, that concludes my presentation, and I want to thank you for your time and your attention, and I hope that you got something out of this.